Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Left-Handed Leftist podcast. You all, we have a really incredible episode today. Today, we're going to be taking a little step away from Maryland politics for this episode and focusing on some ballot initiatives that passed at the most recent November general elections that we had this year, and just talking about different ballot initiatives when it comes to school meals, when it comes to regressive taxation, and also when it comes to some redistricting as well. So, you all, since we have a jam packed episode, let's go ahead and just get right into it with our first article. And our first article comes from Colorado Newsline. It's titled Colorado Voters Approve Boost to Free School Meals Program. Proposition LL and MM would fully fund program created by voters in 2022. And this is by Chase Woodruff. It says two ballot measures to fund Colorado's Universal School Meals Program, the only statewide contest in the 2025 off-year election, were approved by voters Tuesday night, according to unofficial results. The Associated Press called the race in favor of Proposition MM, which would raise $95 million annually for school meals by limiting tax deductions for filers with higher incomes at 8:25 p.m. With more than 1.4 million votes counted, nearly 65% of voters had cast a ballot in favor of Proposition L and 58% of voters in favor of Proposition MM. Both measures were referred to the ballot by the Colorado General Assembly earlier this year. Together, they will shore up funding for healthy school meals for all, a state program that provides free breakfast and lunch to all students regardless of their family's income level. Thank you to every voter, volunteer, community partner, and endorsing organization who turned out to pass Proposition LL and MM, ensuring every child in Colorado can continue to get a healthy meal at school, said Joe Cabaret, campaign manager for the Keep Kids Fed Colorado campaign, said in a press release. Quote, Proposition LL and MM will keep kids fed in school, leading to better grades, higher graduation rates, and better outcomes for Colorado students. Colorado voters approved the ballot measure to create the program 3 years ago. It was funded by limiting income tax deductions for filers earning over $300,000 per year. The program's funding mechanism raised more than expected in 2023 and 2024 fiscal year, but its costs also exceeded projections, resulting in a budget gap that rose to roughly $50 million this year. So let's take a pause right there real quick. I want to give accolades where accolades are due. I want to really congratulate not only not really the lawmakers, but more so the activists and organizers who got the Colorado State Legislature to put this on the ballot, but also that did the work to get voters educated about these two propositions and got them to pass as well in the overwhelming majorities that they were able to get this passed in. And it's so good to see them doing this around wealth distribution, taxation, and progressive taxation policies. And I'll say one thing that is so great about the progressive taxation is it takes from people who have more of the means to give, and it redistributes their wealth to people who need it the most, the working class people. So, and I also want to kind of touch on what they talked about here around making it a universal program so that it gives free meals, free breakfast and lunch to all students, regardless of their income, is because one thing with a lot of these means tested policies that we see in most states around nutrition programs at school is that if your family makes even 1 cent over the cutoff point, your family is no longer eligible for those free and reduced meals. So you have some families who may make $1 over what the salary or income cutoff is, and that can have a whole snowball effect to where now your kids aren't able to eat breakfast and lunch. You may be barely scraping by at home. The food that they eat at school may be the only time they get the chance to eat. And now the government would be taking that away from people just because your family doesn't meet the income threshold. And on the other side of that, you also have parents who may deal with mental disabilities, who may be overworked, who may be even neglectful parents, and people who do not go through the process because, along with it being means tested, there's also a process that people have to go through to do income verification. You have to apply for these programs a whole lot of times. You have to keep up with the paperwork. And if you have a parent who's not able to do that, they could be eligible for these programs. It's just that their child is not able to get the program and get the free and reduced meals because their parent does not apply for the program or meet the income verification. And then on the other hand, so it just has a different snowball effect. And then the article also talks about is when students don't have breakfast and lunch, you see a reduction in test scores, you see a reduction in graduation rates, you see higher anger levels and kids acting out more because they're going without their basic need to live, which is food and nutrition. So it's so good to see that the voters of Colorado see the purpose and see the benefit in having some of these universal programs, and also doing it through and funding it through a means of progressive taxation. So let's keep on reading the article. So it continues by saying Proposition LL will allow the state to keep $12.4 million in excess 2023-2024 revenue that would otherwise be returned to voters under the 1992 state constitutional amendment known as the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights. Proposition MM aims to permanently fund the program by further limiting tax deductions for filers earning over $300,000 a year. About 194 Coloradans in that high income category would pay an average of $486 more in income tax yearly, according to a nonpartisan state fiscal analysis. Keep Kids Fed Colorado reported $739,200 in contributions since June, mostly from the nonprofit Hunger Free Colorado. The measures were endorsed by a long list of organizations, including Children's Hospital, Great Education Colorado, Mi Familia Vota, Rocky Mountain Farmers Union, and Save the Children Action Network. The measures did not draw an organized opposition campaign. During a special legislative session in August, Colorado lawmakers tweaked Proposition MM to allow the additional revenue to be spent on broader efforts to reduce food insecurity. Once the Healthy School Meals for All program costs are covered, that would help the state partially offset the impact, estimated at up to $170 million annually, of reduced funding and higher administrative costs for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, as a result of cuts passed by the congressional Republicans in July. Quote, while we celebrate this victory for Colorado kids and families, we also cannot ignore that for thousands of Colorado families, this remains a time of deep economic hardship and food insecurity, made worse by USDA's refusal to provide full funding for SNAP and the devastating cuts to SNAP Congress approved this past summer. Rose, director of the public policy at Hunger Free Colorado, said in a statement. So you all, this is a really, really wonderful piece of legislation here that was passed by voters. And again, I just want to say how great it is to see working class people come together to say that we're going to actually take a stand, put in some progressive taxation to be able to make sure that all kids are fed and able to get at least breakfast and lunch when they're going to public school. To see them not only pass the legislation to allow the excess money that comes from taxes to be used at getting at some of the root causes of hunger, which will in the long run make the program be cheaper to run, because now you have people actually having high paying jobs, people actually having better access to nutritious food, fruit, produce, than just things at dollar stores and processed foods. So you have healthier people, which also means that you have less people going to seek medical attention as well. So it all around saves costs as well, but also for the second proposition, which allows them to continue this taxation on people making over $300,000 as well. And it even shows that because you had no serious opposition to it, because what were people gonna say? That they oppose taxing the wealthiest people within the state to provide children with nutritious food. And that's the thing. A lot of times, this is so shocking to me because you don't see a lot of legislatures move to pass legislation that really gets at the root causes or actually even helps working class people while taking money away from the wealthiest people. So, with this bit of good news from legislative policies, let's go on the opposite side of this and look at some regressive taxation that is being done by the state of Texas. So, this article is from Fox Business. It is titled Texas Cements Business Friendly Reputation After Locking in Tax Bans. Texas cements business friendly reputation with voter approved tax ban. And this is by Summer Park. It starts off saying Texas is cementing its reputation as one of the most business friendly states in America, and now it's written into the state's constitution. Voters approved 3 pro business tax amendments on Election Day, ensuring that the Lone Star State can never impose taxes on capital gains, estates, or inheritance, and certain securities transactions. While Texas does not currently levy these taxes, the new constitutional amendments make the tax certainty permanent, sending a signal to investors and corporations that the state's low tax structure is here to stay. Quote, these votes make it clear that Texas's low tax structure isn't just policy, it's now permanent. Carlos Chapman, a law professor at Southern Methodist University's Dedman's School of Law, told Fox Business. Quote, whereas other states try to lure in Amazon or Facebook with temporary tax breaks or incentives, Texas doesn't have to because we could never change those taxes anyway. The incentives here are permanent, and now it's unconstitutional for the state to start taxing you. So let's take a pause right there. You all, the previous person just said the quiet part out loud. This is not geared to help the working class. This is not geared to help lower income people or even middle income people. This is made to draw in corporations. And it's one thing that we always say on this podcast is that no corporation comes to your community to help your community or because they want to at the goodness of their heart. Corporations only come to your communities because they see that they can make an exorbitant amount of profit from your community. And that is just what Texas is doing. The Texas legislature and unfortunately the Texas voters are siding with big corporations to say, we want you to come in. So here are just unabashed tax benefits and tax cuts that will never put upon you. And it says to wealthy people to move here as well because we won't tax you as well. I mean, you're talking about an inheritance tax, you're talking about a estate tax, you're talking about a capital gains tax, 3 taxes that if you're a working class or even a middle income person, you're not engaged in the type of transactions that if this was taxed is something that you would even face. This is really only for the ultra wealthy and the corporations. So let's keep reading to find out more about this regressive taxation that Texas is doing. It says, here's what the 3 measures mean. Capital gains tax ban prevents Texas from ever taxing profit from the sale of investments, real estate, or other capital assets as a move meant to reassure investors and entrepreneurs. Securities transaction ban bars the state from imposing taxes on financial trades or payroll transactions, officially ruling out a Wall Street tax on buying and selling stocks. A state and inheritance tax ban prohibits any future taxation on wealth transfers after death, a safeguard for business owners and families looking to pass assets to their heirs. That's the message Texas is sending out, not only to the more than 200 companies that have moved their headquarters to the state since the COVID-19 pandemic, including Caterpillar, CBRE, Chevron, Hewlett Packard Enterprises, KFC, and Oracle, but also to potential newcomers weighing relocation. Critics argue that locking in these bans could hamstring future legislatures from raising revenue during economic downturns or to fund essential state services. It also forces the state to rely more heavily on property and sales tax, which tend to hit middle and lower income residents harder. Let's take a pause there for a second. The main problem is that when you take out all these different streams of taxing the wealthy, you're only left with taxing lower and middle income people through things like sales taxes, which are extremely regressive because the people who pay the most in sales taxes are lower income and working people, just because of the amount of things that you have to buy and that you cannot buy them just in bulk like wealthier people. So your items last a whole lot longer. You may only buy things that can last 1 week out here and 1 week out here, or a few days here or there. We want to say also that you cannot raise as much money through sales taxes as you can through progressive taxation through things like inheritance tax, capital gains tax, and estate taxes. And because you can't raise that much money through sales tax, that means that your government services are going to be weakened as well. And then when you look at states like Texas or Florida that do not have things like certain income taxes and other progressive taxation, they have more regressive taxes. You also see that the government services are not well established either. So you have a lot of people who are lower income just going without and having to make it, while these states like Texas become more of a wealthier person's paradise and playground. So let's keep reading here. So it says supporters counter that Texas's growing economy, now the eighth largest in the world, generates more than enough revenue without such taxes, pointing to the state's budget surplus and rapid job growth as evidence that low taxes can fuel prosperity rather than constrain it. The timing is also strategic. The Texas Stock Exchange, XSE, which recently secured SEC approval, is slated to open in Dallas in 2026, positioning itself as a direct challenger to the New York Stock Exchange and the NASDAQ. The TXSE executives say that the goal is to revitalize competition and attract more companies to go public by offering a more affordable and business friendly listing environment. Over the past 25 years, the number of publicly traded companies in the US has dropped by nearly 45%, according to the exchange, a decline it hopes to reverse. Meanwhile, on both coasts, Democrats are taking the opposite approach. In California, a proposed ballot measure would impose a 5% wealth tax on high net worth residents to help fund the state's Medicaid program, underscoring a growing divide in how states approach taxing success. With these constitutional bans now enshrined, Texas has sent a clear message to Wall Street and Main Street alike. Y'all Street is open for business permanently. So there you have it. It's kind of funny reading those two different stories back to back like that, where you have Colorado, which is moving towards a progressive taxation model to make sure that we can tax the wealthy people who mostly kind of shirk their taxes, especially when we're talking about federally, but be able to take money from those who have the most of it and give it to universally, but make it so that programs that are more helpful towards working class people, whereas Texas is prioritizing the ultra wealthy to be able to cater to them while turning their backs on the working class residents. And I know people always say, oh, well, the businesses, they're bringing in the money. Well, the people are the voters, and the voters are the ones who are actually, there's more working class and lower income voters than there are these ultra wealthy people. And you saw one thing in the article that we just read, that how California is doing the complete opposite, where they are actually raising their taxes on the wealthy people to be able to invest in Medicaid so that working class people are able to get health care. Well, when Texas is doing all of these cutting and banning of taxes on the wealthy, leaves to be said is what's going to happen to some of these government programs like Medicaid, which is historically underfunded in states like Texas. So you're going to have residents of Texas who are not able to get health care, or how health care is going to be so underfunded that people aren't able to get the help that they need. But I guess we'll all be okay because the Amazon, Facebooks, and corporations of the state are going to be fine. And I also love how this article, really Fox loves to say the quiet part out loud, that this is all based around Texas setting up their own stock exchange, just so that they can become the ultra wealthy billionaire playground, just like New York City is currently, with how little they tax the millionaires and billionaires there as well. So let's kind of get out the taxation conversation for a little bit and turn to redistricting with our last video here. And this is from the New York Times.
California voters may have just delivered the most consequential result of Election Day. California's map will be redrawn, and 5 Republican held districts will become newly competitive to Democrats. These districts are in the Sacramento region, rural Northern California, the Central Valley, former Riverside County, and inland San Diego. Voters here passed Proposition 50, a ballot measure designed to help Democrats flip 5 Republican held seats to regain control of the House. Until a few months ago, Californians weren't even going to have an election this year. But Governor Gavin Newsom and other California Democrats moved quickly.
Prop 50 is not about drawing lines on a map. It is about holding the line.
To respond to the new Republican districts in Texas by creating new Democratic districts of its own. Republicans were drastically outspent in the final month of the race. It may be that California was simply deemed too expensive and too much of a long shot for Republicans to spend too much time and attention on. Republicans are having far better luck convincing other states to implement new maps, including North Carolina, Missouri, and Ohio.
So let's take a pause right there, real quick. I want to first say that I'm against gerrymandering. I think that it's one of the worst things. It has a negative effect on the voting population because people feel like their votes are disregarded, that they are just moved around like tokens on a chessboard to see who can just set it up just right so that your favorite team, whether red or blue, has enough votes to win. But I also want to be in the real world and say that this wouldn't be happening if it wasn't for Republicans starting off this big gerrymandering for political parties that we have seen recently within the states, like they just mentioned here. North Carolina, Missouri, Ohio, even places like Texas as well. This is a major problem, and you're going to see other Democratic states and other Republican states do this. And it's kind of a slippery slope that once someone starts, you're going to continue to see everyone do it. And I think that honestly, the one solution is to end the gerrymandering altogether that we have within these congressional races. I would also say things like ranked choice voting to make it so that we don't have the quote unquote spoiler effect where people feel like they have to vote for the lesser of two evils, or that's how these really kind of odd candidates come out, and that we have representational actual representation of the voting populace and not just one solid group that can just consolidate votes in a certain way to win. So let's finish up with this video.
A couple weekends back, and voters there told me they were frustrated and angry with President Trump over months of ICE raids and afraid for their community. Others in California were vocally opposed to the measure because they thought California's congressional districts should be determined without concern for partisan politics. Most of the focus has been on the national implications of Prop 50 and what it can mean for control of Congress next year, but there are also some local implications. For instance, in Northern California, one of the districts altered by Prop 50 is a Republican-held district north of Sacramento that stretches up to the Oregon border. And people here are farmers and ranchers, and many of them have long wanted to secede from California entirely. But now this district stretches all the way down to the liberal Bay Area city of Santa Rosa. And residents in the rural northern part of the district are concerned that their priorities will now be overshadowed. A host of Democrats have already announced runs for these newly competitive congressional districts even before Proposition 50 passed. But now that it has, we can expect to see even more Democrats jump into the race.
So again, you have Democrats kind of doing the only response that they could naturally have in the face of Republicans putting forth so much redistricting in their states. And as the video mentioned, you have Republicans who are really against this, and I mean it's kind of hard to really empathize with those Republicans who feel like their voice is not going to be really heard as much because they're getting redistricted. When you look at what the other Republican held states are doing, and they're not caring about the Democrats that are being redistricted out. The one thing that I am hopeful though of this is that in these new districts that there is a lane for more leftist candidates and candidates who are not going along with the establishment to be able to gather a coalition of people from the right, people from the left around economic leftist policies that actually uplift the working class and hold big corporations and the wealthiest accountable. But Outside of that, I'm also hopeful that with these redistricting pops up, people being able to run as independents or third parties as well. Because I think if we're actually going to build any type of working class movement, it's going to have to be outside of the duopoly. So, you all, with that, I want to thank you all so much for being here with us today. We heard a lot today just about the real benefits of progressive taxation, the negatives of regressive taxation, and this whole redistricting fight. And I think that I know I said I was not going to make this a Maryland politics podcast today, but even Maryland is looking at redistricting, which would affect Andy Harris, who was the standalone Republican within Maryland's delegation. But on top of that, Andy Harris is also the chair of the Freedom Caucus in the House as well. So while Maryland only has one Republican, we have one of the most conservative and MAGA Republicans within the House of Representatives federally. And one thing that I'll also add is that Maryland is going through its own conversation of whether we put forth redistricting or not. And actually, I'll tell you all this. Me personally, I'm on the fence about redistricting. On one hand, I look at it and say we do need to do all we can to fight back against the Republicans who are putting forth their own redistricting. While on the other side, I also look at it as it's one seat, and this one seat is not going to change the tide of Congress. But outside of that, as well, Maryland has a history of putting together maps that have been more favorable to Republicans, and the Maryland Supreme Court, which I also know is most of the judges there were appointed by Hogan, who was a Republican and former governor of Maryland. They have been in history oppositional to maps that are ultra supportive of Democrats. And people are concerned that if the Democrats put forward a map that is heavily gerrymandered, it could allow the Supreme Court to draw their own map, which would be more favorable to Republican congressional candidates. So there's always a give and take for you all. I plan to have a podcast come out soon, hopefully, with some people who are pro redistricting and someone who's anti redistricting, to have a conversation between the both of them. And also, what you all I have coming up next year, we're going to be interviewing some candidates. So if there's any candidate running in a race that you're in, whether that be for local office, state office, whether that be for Congress, anything, please let us know. Our contact information is in the show notes down below, you all. And I cannot wait to see you all again. Remember, this is a podcast, which means please, however you're listening to us, rate us 5 stars. And if you're watching us on YouTube, hit that like button. And on any platform, hit the follow button, hit the share button with your friends and family. And also don't forget to hit that notifications bell so you can get alerted every time we have a teaser episode coming out, or that we also have our full episodes, which come out every Wednesday. Again, thank you all so much. And I'll see you next time here on the Left-Handed Leftist podcast. See y'all.